someone cares about you.
There's a reason why your heart is beating.
You still have a purpose.
Don't give up.
It's important to know that you're not alone.
You're not alone.
You're not alone.
You are not alone.
Steve, thank you so much for coming on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast and sharing your story. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad I was able to see that message. We had a little snafu, but everything's back in working order, and I'm glad we connected.
Absolutely. I mean, everything's going to work out how it's meant to be.
Yeah.
Before we dive into the work that you're doing with your nonprofit, I'd love to know a little bit more about yourself. Could you tell me how you grew up and ended up in the military?
Yeah, for sure. I'll try not to belabor it too long. It can be quite a story. So I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. I was born in Colorado. Spent most of my time playing soccer. That was my sport. And now that my son's of age, he's playing soccer now. So it's a really cool bonding experience. But I spent most of my time in high school and with the intentions to go to college, play soccer there, and then with the hopes and dreams to play professionally. Well, those were shattered when I went to high school, and I played good high school, played decently on the teams, but our team wasn't like being scouted. Like nobody was looking at our team to pick somebody up, and I certainly didn't have the money, and my parents didn't have the money to pay for us to go to a university. So I went to a community college. I didn't get a scholarship or anything like that. And so I started thinking, what am I going to do with my life? Like I had this goal and this, ambition to do these special things, and it's not panning out. Well, I was also a space nerd. I really enjoy astronomy and things like that. And just the vastness of space and the unknown. So I went to college for a year with, a focus in astronomy, really enjoyed the classes, but I looked around at who was around me, and the age gap was significant. And so I was like, this is not it. This is just like high school again. I can do something else. And mind you, I'm 18 or 19 years old, a year out of high school. And I still feel like there's just something else out there. So my dad, he was a police officer at the time, working the gang task force, and spent 30 years in law enforcement. He spent a few years in the Air Force. And we spoke, and he said, yeah, I'm looking to join the military. Naturally, I went to the Air Force, went to a recruiter, and took the ASVAB, and scored really well on the ASVAB. And they're like, hey, you can pretty much do anything you want. And so I was like, okay, cool. What's like a difficult career to get into that you would need to be intelligent? And they're like, yeah, a nuclear weapons apprentice. And I was like, that sounds pretty cool. My buddies, they all got like scholarships, and they went to the university with intent, like for engineering, with the intent to go to Raytheon and IBM, these missile making factories, And I was like, you know what? Here's the plan. I created this plan, and I said, I'm going to go into the Air Force as a nuclear weapons apprentice, get trained through there, get my GI Bill, and then I'm going to get out and I'm going to go to college and catch up with my buddies, and it's going to be like old times. And so that was the plan. I walked out of the recruiter's office, like all set, like everything's ready to go. And then right next door was an Army recruiter. And as I stepped out, he's like, hey, son, hey, you want to be in Special Forces? And I was like, I have never thought of that, but that sounds pretty cool. And so I went and I was like, tell me, let me hear what you have to say. And so like, sell it to me. And, he put out a really good pitch. And I was like, man, that sounds really cool. And no one's ever like planted that seed in my brain of like, I could do something special. And I was like, okay, but I don't want to be in the Army. That's one thing I didn't want to be in the Army. I was like, I'll be back. I'm going to go check out the Air Force again real quick. So I walked into the recruiter's office and I said, hey, you guys got any special operations jobs? And they're like, yeah, but you wouldn't make it. And I was like, okay, yeah, give me the information and also cancel that contract I just signed. Like, he's like, no, just stick with what you got. And I was like, nah, that ain't it. I looked at what the jobs were available, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. Actually, I chose combat control, and then and I was like, I don't know what that is, but they're controlling combat, and that sounds like a pretty cool thing. Pararescue was the other job, and I didn't really want to do medicine, and that it just didn't seem like something I was into. And so I started training, and then when I went to take the PT test, the PASS test, and they're like, "All right, which one are you going to do?" I was like, the combat control one, and they're like, "No, one has the swim at the beginning, one has the swim at the end." And I was like, "I guess I prefer to do the swim at the beginning." They're like, "All right, you're going to be a PJ," and I was like, "Hold on a second, I thought I was going to be a combat controller." They're like, "It's the same thing. When you get there, just tell them what you want. It doesn't really matter." And I was like, "Okay," I believed him. And
Of course.
yeah, and I got lied to. And so then I finished it. I finished the PASS test, and they're like, "All right, you're going to be a PJ. Yep, sign it online. You're going to MEPS next month." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So then I showed up, and I was like, "Hey, I thought I was going to be a controller, and all these people are trying to be PJs." And then that started my pathway into where I am now.
Yeah, it's really funny when you're talking to a recruiter, you don't realize what you don't know about the military and all the different jobs that are available. It's such a massive enterprise.
Yeah, and you think that these people are looking after you when it's like, "All right, let's check some boxes here and let's mark some quotas." And like, this person wasn't looking out for me because he probably has a legitimate amount of like 90 to 100 people trying to become PJs or controllers every year, and it's a 90% attrition rate. So he doesn't care. They didn't care. They're just like, "Okay, there's another one to get in there, pad my numbers."
Now, within the pararescue community, that's a pretty intense job that can take you all over the world. So what did your career end up looking like while you were in?
Yeah, so it starts off with a selection course, which used to be called INDOC, and now it's called Special Warfare Assessment and Selection. And back when I went through it in 2005, you do it's all physical, but the mental part is really waking up in the morning and knowing the day's about to be awful. It's about to suck. And so most of that suck is in the water. And so you're doing water confidence training, holding your breath, underwater stuff, passing snorkels back and forth, drown proofing, just the works. Yeah. And so we started with 120 people and we finished with 12. And and so at the end, where you're like, "All right, so finished in doc," and then you go, "Wait a minute, I still have a whole nother 2 years of training to go. I'm still not even a PJ yet. I still got to go to airborne. I still have to go to free fall, survival, underwater survival, paramedic school, dive school, EMT basic, and then the apprentice course." So all that totals up to be another 2 years. So after completing all of that, and finally graduating in 2008. So joined in 2005, finished in 2008. I was stationed in Okinawa and did 3 years out there, had a good combat rotation. And I think I'll backtrack it a little bit. I think I started calling myself a black cloud, and it really started to present itself was that INDOC, that first selection course, was in the water portion. One of our class leader, one of the teammates, he ended up passing away during the training. So he was 42 years old. He was going to be a combat rescue officer. He was a really gnarly pool session. Everybody's getting yelled at. And we did a really long 50-meter underwater with a front flip underwater. And it was pretty rough. Well, he had a hidden heart condition that he didn't know about. And ultimately went into cardiac arrest during the underwater portion. They pulled him out, did CPR, brought him back, and then he passed away at the hospital there. But that loss was like the first of many, and that really was once he died. He was my partner during Hell Night, which is a 36-hour event of just continuous training, and so he was like, we had no more than arm's length away from each other throughout the entire time. And when he died, I was like, okay, I was prepared for this. This is what it's about, because is losing teammates. This is just the first teammate of many, which is true. But that's when I started to normalize it, and then that kind of played into later in life when I deployed with a unit in Okinawa, and it was a pretty active rotation. And then came back, and then the tsunami in mainland Japan happened. went out and did a bunch of rescue stuff out there, and then ended up PCSing. And that was in 2011, and then PCS to Nellis, to Vegas, with another rescue squadron, and deployed a couple more times there. And those were very active rotations, got a lot of experience. And in 2013 is when the rescue squadrons that I was deploying a bunch with, those were pulling out of Afghanistan, and really, they weren't really going to see a lot of combat anymore. And I was like at the peak of my combat, like, mental readiness, my physical readiness. And I thought, man, I still have a lot left I'll have a lot of fight in me. I still want to get after it. And so I went and assessed for our Tier 1 unit, the 24th Special Tactics Squadron, assessed for that. And this is a whole other selection process, a 2-week selection. We started with 15 people. 6 of us got picked up, and then you do a whole other year of training. And this is at the Tier 1 level. So you're working with Tier 1 Navy SEALs and Tier 1 Army Special Operators. And so, yeah, it's a whole other year of focus on hostage rescue, high value target type stuff, and really doing the national mission. So did another, 9 years with those folks deploying, essentially a total of 10 times.
Wow. That's just to start off your career with a loss of a teammate, especially during a time, in the process where you don't expect to be losing anybody because you're all learning. That's a rough start to the career. Then to have a career serving along a top tier special operation forces during a massive evacuation of a combat country, not to mention all the other small conflicts that are happening throughout the world and natural disasters that our military goes and renders aid in. Those experiences just kind of compound upon one another. So from that, like, how did that end up shaping you as a person?
I think it turned me into, as it does with all military members, very direct, very to the point, and very action oriented. Not a lot of empathy, which really affected mostly my home life, because I would much rather, my family was growing at the same time, or, we were having kids, we're moving from place to place, they're going to school, things are happening at home while I'm, going out doing training, deploying, coming back, training, deploying, the same cycle over and over. So the stress at home, I would have much rather been getting shot at, and in a firefight, I was a lot easier and more calm there than at home with my kids screaming and yelling. And it's like, I don't know how to control that. I don't know how to, make that stop. And the only way I knew how to make that stop was just to be loud. So that then in turn started to cause friction within the family unit. But yeah, I think that's how the constant deploying shaped me, in that regard, I guess, and then led to where I am now.
Yeah, trying to find that balance between active duty military or just deployment type of life of, we have a specific mission, we do a specific thing, and then balancing that with the civilian side of people that aren't going through our experiences is really difficult. I remember being withdrawn for a long portion of my life and just kind of being almost rudely direct with family members about very sensitive matters to them, whether it was health concerns or financial concerns. And I remember just my brain would shut off when I would hear them complain or get upset about things that I found trivial. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to engage with anybody. And it was whenever there were family events or anything like that, I just kind of found a spot on the couch or something like that, and I would just kind of stare and focus on other stuff. Like, especially when I was the team leader, I would be thinking about what's the next step, what's happening next week, what's happening next month, who's on alert, where are we deploying to. Those are the things that were going through my mind. I had no concerns with what was happening in front of me, which was my family. And so that was definitely played a part later in my career.
Yeah, and I know that many veterans and first responders struggle with very similar things like we're currently discussing. What was your transition experience like? And do you have any advice that you would give other veterans or first responders going through a similar thing?
Yeah, so my transition was very different than most others. But the advice that I give to anybody that is starting their transition out is to take time. Like if you're transitioning out, like I know there's a lot of transition programs, and most of them are geared towards what's the next step. And it's going from finishing your career in the military and then jumping right into some corporate job or whatever it is. So it's just going from one form of employment to the next. And there's no downtime in between there. And my transition, I had about a year of downtime. And that wasn't by choice, but that allowed me to really focus on me. For the first time in my adult life, it was what does Steve want to do today? What do I value? What is the next thing in life for me? And what should I prioritize? Which I started to realize how much time I miss with my family. So I try to share that with other folks when they go straight from like, I just retired and now I'm going straight into this job with this company. And you're like, well, yeah, you didn't give yourself any time. Like you went from this employment to this employment. And the difference is you're doing this for a job. And what you did in the military was for a purpose. And when you get upset because it's not the same, that's when you're going to start falling apart. And the symptoms that you were hiding are going to start presenting themselves. So my transition was a lot different, where I ended up medically retiring with the diagnosis of PTSD. I was the team leader of this excellent group of warriors. Part of our training is to do mountain rescue. On one of our mountain training iterations out in Boise, Idaho, there was an accident with the anchor in which the rope was affixed to. The rock shattered under the weight of one of our guys. And so he fell about 30 feet, and this was a 70-foot face. And the part of our training, or what we're trained to do, is tie into the anchor at the top. Well, one of the guy that fell, that was going down and actively rappelling down the rope, pulled the other one off of the very top. So he fell a full 70 feet and impacted the ground below. The rest of us, rushed to him and started treating him as best we could, but he ultimately passed away essentially almost on impact. And that, I lost a lot of teammates before, and throughout my 10 deployments, between friends taking their own lives, friends getting shot, blown up, whatever it was, I lost a lot of them. But this one was very different because I wasn't mentally prepared for this accident. And that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, of where I was like, all right, something is wrong with me. Like, I don't enjoy this job anymore. I'm going down depression. I'm having recurring dreams, the same dream over and over. I don't consider it a nightmare, but our psychologists classify it as a nightmare because it's the same thing over and over again. I have sleep apnea at age 30, anxiety through the roof. I'm not attentive to my family, distant, can't remember people. So all these things compiling up. And, fortunately at the unit that I was at, we had a robust staff of specialists that focused on these things: psychologists, strength and conditioning coaches, physical therapists. And I worked with them a lot to get back to where I was and to address some of these problems. And I really went to them when, after Peter died, and my wife sat me down at a similar time frame and said that my two boys were scared of me, and that was a kick in the gut to know that they were scared of me when I'm supposed to be the one protecting them. So that's when I started saying, okay, I have to go see somebody. And so they helped out, the therapists helped out, and I rejoined the team after I pulled myself off for a little bit, and deployed again, came back, and the investigation closed out for the accident I described earlier. which they found that there was nothing we could have done to change the outcome, and there's nothing, that we could have done to predict it. But the military wanted to hold somebody accountable, and they held me accountable as the team leader and removed me from my job and the position and the unit that I was at. And that threw me back into, a depression. And now, somebody was convincing me that it wasn't my fault for, a year. And now I had a piece of paper that said it is my fault. I had the evidence to show my psychologist, this is my doing, and drove me right down into a pathway of depression and worse than I ever was. So I was given a choice to either PCS and move back to Vegas, or get out. And I chose to get out and medically retire. I knew the pathway ahead of me. If I was going to go to Vegas, I was going to destroy myself and my family. And that wasn't acceptable for me. So with no clue what I was going to do next, I pursued a medical retirement, and that started my essentially year clock of doing VA appointments and really looking after what do I want to do next. This is the first time in my life I can focus on me.
Now, I mean, almost any one of those missions and occurrences could be enough to cause some sort of post-traumatic stress with any individual, not to mention the compounded effect that you've had throughout your career to end with, this piece of paper that says you're responsible for this action. And I think making that decision to get out, while is a very difficult one, was probably the best one for you to make, especially to address your PTSD and put your values in your life and your family's life ahead of the needs or wants of the military. And that's a hard decision for anybody. And I know that this is still kind of recent for you. This was in the last couple of years, wasn't it?
Correct. Yeah. So I got out 2 years ago, June of 2021. So a little less than 2 years ago.
How have you managed your PTSD treatment symptoms over these last couple of years? Because again, this is all kind of still new and fresh, but you seem to have a very positive outlook on the way things are going right now, to the point where you've started a nonprofit organization to also help people, get to the level that you're at.
Yeah. I think with that last year, from, essentially June of 2020 to June of 2021, I spent, a ton of time focusing on me and my family and how do I get me right again. And with that, had a plan of action as far as, like I described when I first got in. I said, all right, I'm going to get out. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get an executive MBA or something like that, learn about business, and then open up a gym. And I really valued the resources that I had. And I was like, I want to open up a gym that has the same resources that I used. And so I got an internship at Exos. And with that, I had the intention of, hey, I'm going to get a job with them, go to school, and then this is how I'm going to make my money. And then eventually in 2025 or something like that, I'll open up this gym when I've got all the, I've learned it all. And at the end of the internship, I asked the guy I was shadowing, and I said, hey, is there going to be a job at the end of this? And he's like, no, there's not. And he's like, you don't want a job, man. That's not what you're looking for. He said, you need to do what you said you're going to do. You need to start up the thing you said you're going to do. And I said, I don't know how to do that. I don't know what to do. Like, is there somebody I talk to? You got a phone number I can call? And he's like, yeah, I just went to this place and filed for my business on here. So I knew what I wanted for the business. I just didn't know how to structure it. And then doing a little bit of thinking, I said, all right, this is the only way that this is going to work is if it's a nonprofit. And I reached out to a lot of folks to get advice, which they weren't too friendly. Didn't get a lot of good advice or valuable advice. But there was a couple people, and that was my co-founder, Dr. Jennifer Byrne, and I asked her, hey, can you help me stand this nonprofit up? And we discussed what it would look like. And then I filed for paperwork for the nonprofit and called it Shields and Stripes. And with the intent to treat people the same way that I was treated at the end of my career with strength conditioning program, a dietitian, a physical therapist, a psych doc, all these people working to provide all the resources for a mind-body experience. And because I did that internship with Exos, I called up my relationships there and said, hey, now that I've started this up, can I use your guys' facility and bring people, veterans and first responders there? And they're like, yeah, for sure. And they're like, okay, cool. We'll call it this time period. They're like, yeah, sounds good. So it was pretty much like a under the table agreement, and looked around at people that I thought would be, it would benefit them to go through this program that we're creating. And they came out to it. We raised enough money to bring them out and hosted a cohort, and it ended up doing really well. And so it took off from there. But to manage my symptoms and my PTSD, I have a really close friend who's a pastor, so I relied a lot on him, rediscovering my faith, and that helped significantly. And then helping other people, that gave me purpose. I don't get paid from this, but I do feel a form of wealth because I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Like I'm helping other people that are at their end, their wits' end. They don't know where else to turn. So that's healing in itself for me, to be able to work diligently to help these other folks. And it turns out with the program, I have a ton of licensed professionals around me. So if I ever do feel like, things aren't right, I just, give them a call and say, hey, why am I experiencing this? And then they can walk me through it. So
yeah, it's pretty amazing that, in helping others, we help ourselves, finding that purpose. And it doesn't necessarily need to be our profession, but definitely giving back to a community that we feel strongly about. Now, with the co-founding of Shields and Stripes, you guys provide a ton of different modalities for care for first responders and veterans. And I think you have had 3 different cohorts or teams at this point.
Yeah, so we just actually finished our 4th one. We had that one start in March, and they're 3-month cohorts. And for your listeners, it's a 3-month cohort hosted inside of Exos facilities. 3 weeks of it's in person, and 9 weeks of it is telehealth. The individual applies online, and then we screen the application looking for any kind of substance abuse dependencies, or if they are have more of an acute response to wanting to take their own life or suicidal ideation, then we'll resource them, outsource them to different resources and take care of them that way. But they're not qualifying for our particular program because we're not a detox facility. So inside Exos facilities, once they're selected, they then fly out to one of the facilities. One would be in Phoenix, Arizona. One's in Pensacola, Florida. Those are the 2 we're using right now. We have more available to us as we start pulling in more funding. And then they'll stay in a resort hotel. And then they'll go for the 3 weeks, Monday through Friday, show up at or be driven to the gym. They'll get a strength conditioning program for them. They'll meet with a dietitian, a nutrition plan made specifically for them and their goals. They'll get a full movement screening and see a PT or a physical therapist every day. So work on their injuries. And then they'll get psych therapy in the afternoons, both individual and group therapy with different evidence-based treatments, whatever their preferred method is. And so in between there, they'll get massage and yoga and like equine growth therapy, different types of therapy offerings that are available to them. Like, hey, this may not be for you, but this might be for you. You're open to try it out. This is something that we do on the weekends so they can try out different things and see what works for them. So once they're done with the 3 weeks in person, then they transition into our telehealth model, which they still have those same providers, same clinicians. So they'll still have a psych doc, they'll still have a physical therapist, they'll still have a strength coach and a dietitian that will go with them, virtual space. And they'll step out of there with a Theragun and smart goggles with our partnership with Therabody. And then we're developing partnerships with different companies that make physical performance equipment. So we'll have a physical therapy kit that they'll walk out of there with. And then we'll incorporate the families. And as I described earlier, with what my wife said to me, mostly it's the family that sees the PTSD first. And now we can incorporate the family and say, here's this new person that's coming home. How do we now apply the tools that were learned in person to the home life? How do we make sure that you're still eating the same way and you're still working out the same way and you're still getting the same, telehealth treatment or the same psych treatment, and then do that throughout the 9 weeks. And then once they finish, they become an alumni of the program. We still do check up, the 3 month, 6 month, 9 month, 12 month mark, because life happens. And if they, for some reason, have some sort of issues in the future, then we'll address those and make sure that we're committed to them and their healing.
It's really awesome. I love those types of programs that, like yourself, I went through an extensive out process in the military with a limited duty on the military side or Navy side, and experiencing different potential modalities to better my physical health, mental health, professional health, kind of redirecting my life from a path that I'm no longer a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And your program sounds like it really provides a lot of different outlets for your participants. What's the response been, the follow-up for your 4 different cohorts so far?
Really, really excellent. So a lot of them, they want to continue to stay involved because they have such a good experience of going through our cohorts that they want to find ways to give back, and they want to find ways to do what I'm doing, which is, and most of the team is all either veterans themselves or spouses. So they want to look for ways to give back in the way that they received. So a lot of them have put on their own fundraising events. A lot of them, they come and speak at the cohort. They'll come with me to events and speak on their experiences. So they're the reporting or their experience afterwards, the results afterwards is all positive.
Right on. Now, I know within the first responder veteran community, especially amongst operators and people that have had very stressful operational jobs, there's a lot of misconceptions that come about what mental well-being is all about or how to live life after service should be. What are some of the misconceptions that you're finding your audience is experiencing, and how do you help challenge these misconceptions through Shields and Stripes?
Yeah, I think the most predominant phrase and misconception I hear from everybody is, I was just a cop, and I haven't seen the things you've seen. I haven't done these things. Right there, that's a comparison of my traumatic experience isn't as traumatic as yours, and that's a misconception that and a phrase and a stigma that I would like to cut away. I want folks in our line of work to let that go, because there's a pride and an ego associated with that, and your traumatic experience is very different than what mine is, and my expectations are very different than what theirs are. The symptoms, the beautiful part about what we do and bringing the different professions in one place is they all have different experiences. Some could be combat related, some could be childhood related, and some could be sexual assault related. A lot of time the symptoms are very similar, and no one's is ever more worse than the other. It's always, we've experienced these symptoms and now we're healing together, especially when they're there on site together. There's a bond that takes place, almost like a trauma bond, that they're healing all this together. They're going through these different experiences, these emotional roller coasters. So I would encourage anybody that's listening that is in the profession to never compare your experiences to somebody else. You don't know what what they feel like inside. You don't know what their experiences are, but you know what you feel. So I would go off of how you feel. And then secondly, the normalization, misconception of I'm fine. I'm fine. Like, well, if everybody's telling you you're not fine, take a step back and humble yourself and look at yourself in the mirror. Am I different? Am I more angry than I've ever been? Am I in the worse shape than I've ever been? Am I drinking more than I should? And hold yourself accountable and say, this, I can fix this. I can change. I want better for myself. My family deserves better. I deserve better. And then start working at those things. And it's not going to change overnight. But those are things that I would encourage folks in our profession to take a look at, themselves in the mirror.
Yeah, when you were talking about kind of the, oh, so and so has it worse than I do, or I've only done this. Those are definitely conversations I've had with other people about my own personal experiences and why I've been hesitant in the past to share some things that people would find traumatizing, because trauma is very relative to what we've experienced.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And just because we see other people that have had perceived harder times than us doesn't negate our own experience. So I love that you're trying to work on that misconception within the veteran and first responder community. I mean, Steve, you've done some amazing work in such a short period of time through Shields and Stripes. What do you see like the long-term goals for your organization being?
I'm a big thinker. I have big visions. At the very end of the day, I would love to see, whether it's us or not, I would love to see the model of care for veterans and first responders change. I would love to see what I was offered within the SOCOM community at our unit. I would love to see that in every first responder, fire station, law enforcement, and conventional unit having those resources available to them. That ultimately would be great. Whether it's us doing something or not, that's the long term of getting people to help. For us specifically, I would love to, in 10 years, to have a performance facility of our own that we don't have to worry about other people's schedules or other organizations' schedules, and we can take in veterans and first responders on a rotational basis, like a rotating door. Somebody shows up this week, they have 3 weeks in the cohort, and then they move on, and it's just rotating through and getting people in and out of there as much as possible. And then before that, continuing to expand and receive donations from good, hearted patriots that can help out getting more of our folks through. Because right now we're only running 2 cohorts a year, and we could run up to 12. But the funding is really what's hurting us, and a lot of it's travel, because inflation and the way travel is going right now, it's only going up, and that's at least about a little less than half of our expenses is lodging and airfare. So those, if we could tackle those, I would love to see more folks getting help. Yeah.
Right on. Now, I know that you guys have just recently become one of the charities on Charity Miles, and you had talked about a lot of veterans want to find ways to give back, but unfortunately, not everybody has an opportunity to do things like you've done, which is devote so much time and attention to giving back in such a massive way. But organizations like Charity Miles give people the opportunity to do their own individual fundraising for specific organizations. Would you mind talking a little bit about your partnership that you have with Charity Miles?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a partnership with Exos, and Exos sponsored us on that Charity Miles app. And when you download it and go on there, you can find us as a charity. And the beautiful thing about this is it can be done anywhere, and you can do peer-to-peer campaigns. We do host a lot of events, but most of those are in very specific regions, and not everybody can be a part of it. And I get a lot of people that say, "Hey, I want to do something for you guys. I want to find a way to be involved." So rather than just giving us $20 out of their pocket, how do they find a way to activate everybody else around them and the community around them? Well, this is a way to do it. And downloading Charity Miles, selecting us as a charity on that app, you can create peer-to-peer campaigns. So you can have somebody sponsor you. Say, for example, if somebody says, "I'll give you, $1 per mile up to $500 as the cap, and for a specific amount of time. And now, as this person walks, runs, bikes, whatever it is, they would then accrue that amount of money up until the cap, and then we would receive that donation. And this is a way to activate a lot of people around you in your community to be involved. So it's not just the individual putting in, and now it's a bunch of folks who are passionate patriots that want to help folks that are quite literally on the edge of taking their own life. If anybody's listening and wants to find a way to get involved, and they don't have to, they could just select us as a charity on there, and they don't have to donate anything. We're just on there, and now you're just walking miles for us.
You know, one of the things I love about this organization, I came across them years and years ago as we were starting 1 Mile, One Veteran, is that not only are you able to raise money for organizations that you care about or causes that you want to support, but one of the things that walking does for the individual doing the walking is it raises our endorphins, gets us starting to feel better. So for those of us that do struggle with intrusive thoughts, having a purpose to your walk while listening to this episode is a great way to improve our own mental health, improve our physical well-being, and be a part of a greater cause.
Yeah, tremendous. Yeah, exactly that. Doing something active, that's another way that you asked, how do I manage my PTSD? I work out. That's what I do. I go hit it in the gym, and it does raise endorphins. It makes me feel good. And it gives me clarity throughout the day. You know, I still have a lot of tasks I do within the nonprofit, and doing that, taking time for myself to punish myself in the dungeon. That's it's a must. I have to do that.
Right on. Well, Steve, I really enjoyed our conversation and getting to know more about you and your organization. Before I let you go, I just would love to know, what message would you like to share with our listeners, particularly those that are struggling with their mental health?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's so much to say to that. With individuals that are struggling, and without being too cliche, you're not the only one. You're not the only one that's out there that's having these thoughts and these dilemmas. Usually, the thought and the decision to take your own life happens within 3 to 5 second time frame. I would challenge, if that's ever a thing to you, to pick up the phone and call somebody that you love, or a friend of yours, somebody who might understand you. I have answered several phone calls of individuals that were very intent on taking their life, with gun in hand, and talking to them, and they're still alive today. And just that conversation alone, and keeping that individual busy, will take that thought right out of their mind, because it's usually with, I think, a 3 to 5 second window that they've made this decision to go through with it. And if you're somebody, around somebody that is experiencing these struggles, and you see this, it's a very simple to ask, are you okay? And not in a way that they can say, yeah, I'm fine, and walk away, but hey, are you genuinely, are you okay? I even tell my son that, because with bullying at school these days, it's just getting worse and worse. I encourage him to say that and ask his friends, hey, are you okay? I know that I can see that something's wrong. I would love to listen. And just saying that, acknowledging that, acknowledgement is a lot of times what they're looking for. Hey, no, I'm not okay. Here's what's going on. And then allows them to unload some of their struggles and some of their pains. And hopefully there's some sort of something resonates with them, and they can connect and say, yeah, you're not alone. I know this person, or I experienced these things. It's a long answer.
That's a great response. I really appreciate it, Steve. Where can people find out more about your organization and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so we've got a website that we're continuing to revamp and continuing to innovate on. So www.shieldsandstripes.org. We do have that, and we've got an Instagram handle, and we're on LinkedIn. So all of that's on the website. Please feel free to look on there. We do have testimonial videos that if you are an individual that's curious about applying, I encourage you to watch some of the videos. These are regular people that, every single one of their stories, there's something that'll resonate with you, whether it's, a first responder or a veteran of different capacities. So watch the videos. And then if you're a donor, please reach out. And every little bit helps, because we have a long list of about 250 people that are waiting for help. And at this rate, it's going to take 10 years to see them all. So we need help to see them in less than 10 years.
Well, thank you so much, Steve, for coming on and sharing your story. It's been a pleasure talking to you here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Thank you for having me.